Hello, my name's Mark Jones and I'm a teacher on the intensive course at Tokyo Kasei University. And today I'd like to talk to you about problems teaching listening online. A little bit about me. I'm a teacher first of all, and I also do research, though it's not within my remit strictly speaking. My main area of research is phonology acquisition, and I'm interested in straightforward methods for the classroom and, by extension, the online classroom. So in this talk I'll go through the following points, which are the prevailing orthodoxy, which is based on teacher education, McGurk effects and streaming infrastructure, subtitles and orthography, independence and autonomy, and assessment. So to begin, listening has been dubbed the Cinderella skill, and this keeps getting rolled out every now and again, in that listening really isn't taught very well. It's usually assessed. However, I do think things are changing, but one of the things that kind of tends to stop people from moving forward with their teaching of listening is what Field calls the comprehension approach. And this is based on preset questions, generally global gist and local detail. In fact, it's not just based on it, it's entirely reliant on these questions. And it's still the most common way to teach, according to survey information in my research. However, most teachers in Japan want more training in listening, so people are open to new ideas. However, we haven't had a lot of training given for online remote teaching, according to a very limited sample that I did with teachers worldwide in university English programs. So it looks like there could be some problems happening. However, how can we reduce these problems is something I'd like to address. So one problem that seems to be happening is McGurk effects, and this is based on streaming infrastructure and how we're teaching online. So the McGurk effect is quite interesting. What it is best described by actually playing you this video.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba. Ba.
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
Ba.
Take another look.
Ba.
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
Ba.
Now to the left of the screen.
Ba.
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
Ba. In the illusion, what we see overrides what we hear.
Okay. So, why is this relevant? Well, it's highly relevant because, according to some of my students, Netflix is bumpy in Zoom, and so can YouTube be. Now, when we're doing this, we have to think about how our learners are accessing streams if we are using streaming audio and video, because as you can see, if there is some kind of disruption with video and audio synchronicity, then there are going to be problems. There are going to be problems with listening, quite possibly. So, what can we do to reduce this? Well, can you use something else other than Netflix? Do you have to use a streaming site? And does it actually have to be you that streams it? If it does need to be streamed, can students actually use the streaming site directly? Do they have their own accounts if it's something that requires an account? These are things that you could consider. So, next I'd like to take a look at subtitles and orthography. It's quite an interesting area. So, I used to be quite anti-subtitles because I thought, it's something that learners can, and still they do, quite often over-rely on subtitles. However, I'm changing my mind the more I read about it. So, Natalia Wisniewska and Joan Mora at University of Barcelona did some research on subtitles and found that L1 subtitles improve understanding of meaning and that L2 subtitles improve pronunciation. Okay, so this is quite useful. It's even if our students are over relying on L1 subtitles, it does mean that there are some benefits to it. However, it can have some strange interactions with phonology acquisition. So, following on from what Wisniewska and Mora found, so there can be an effect on phoneme length by Japanese learners of English when they're looking at English subtitles, because they're taking into account things that they've learned as rules for sounds. Also, Bassetti said that pinyin may interfere with learning of Chinese by non-native speakers. However, Showalter and Hayes Harb found that novel orthography, such as tone marks, for English learners of Chinese can be positive. And Wisniewska and Mora found no significant benefits for phonological accuracy in perception. So subtitles may not be actually helping with listening to sounds of words and things overall, or acquiring those. So it's all based on the meaning. Okay. Any benefits there? And there may be some. We still don't know an awful lot about subtitles. So, next I'd like to take a look at independence and autonomy. So, John Field recommends micro-listening. Okay, and what micro-listening is something that features single sentences or pairs of sentences, basically very short sections of text drawn from published off-air or internet recordings. So basically we're looking at very short parts of an authentic text. Now, this can be great for student autonomous listening, because you can just set them with it, provide a link, and away they go. Okay, and you can do this with partial YouTube embeds in Moodle or in Wordpress. Our partial embeds do not work in Google Slides, otherwise I'd just show you one to start with, but you can probably get more benefit out of this by just fiddling around yourselves. So basically, when you take a look at the link when you're embedding a YouTube video on a web page, you just add the code for start time in seconds and end time in seconds, as demonstrated in this slide. And that will give you your small embed, but it must be a minimum of 2 seconds. Any clips that are less than 2 seconds, well, it is possible and realistic, but it is time consuming. You'll need to use VLC to get the codec. Not every YouTube video does this, but if it does work, basically in Tools you go to Get Codec, copy the codec URL, then paste it into your browser, right click and download. Then you've got to edit it in video editing software. I use Shortcut because I'm a Windows user, but should work with anything.
I learned what resources I use to learn.
After you do your micro listening, you might want to go macro, so start short and build up in length. And this can really improve students' confidence and also hearing those single sounds in a very small context and then in a wider context. And also use it to help build up working memory with some of those sounds that are quite difficult to hear. However, students do get tired. Okay, it's not just my classes. Well, I've been assured that it's not just my classes anyway, but there is a reason for this fatigue. Break up your work. Don't give too much close listening all at once. Don't be afraid to give short breaks between close listenings, because the cognitive load can be quite immense. If you organise your files online, you can give your students access to this and they can do it at their own pace, perhaps. You can use Google Drive, WordPress, Moodle and Dropbox. I'm sure some universities use Moodle. If you don't use Moodle, a lot of universities have Google Drive or something similar. I've talked about the electronic environment, but we cannot control students' actual learning environment, so we have to advise on this. Okay, so a lot of students don't make good choices about places where to study or setting up their environments where they're studying. So things like temperature, airflow and distractions can cause a lot of tiredness due to working memory in a regular classroom. In an online classroom it's still the same because the classroom just becomes whichever room the student's in. So do advise students to have sufficient airflow. If they're too hot they cannot concentrate. If they're too cold they can't concentrate. Okay. So finally I'd like to look at assessment. Okay, and how do we carry out assessment and how do we prevent copying? Well, to be honest, I would just assume that collaboration is happening because it's a good thing. Don't worry about it too much. Yes, it is nice to have individual scores for all of our students and how they're attacking their listening problems, but at the end of the day we're not in a situation where this can happen consistently. So generally don't worry. In the real world, students will often be talking to each other to check answers and things, particularly if we're thinking about English for academic purposes, an academic lecture. Well, what did you think was happening? What was the teacher talking about? And so on. This is sensible, so it's not something that we need to be kind of scared of. In fact, we should probably welcome it. So things that have worked for me for assessment, and it does depend on your context. Independent listening journals have worked very well for me. Having my students give summaries and reactions and then talking about developmental strategies to build their listening skills. So basically, what problems have they had and how do they plan to get around those problems in the future. And I've also created online tests in Moodle, and this has worked well. You can also shuffle those questions if you like. I don't, but that's because there's usually a logical flow to some of my questions. So that's basically everything. So I've looked at the prevailing orthodoxy, which is the comprehension approach, McGurk effects, and streaming infrastructure that can affect how we listen, subtitles and orthography, and that can affect how students might learn. Looked at a bit of independence and autonomy and strategies for making that happen, and talked a little bit about assessment. So these are my references. I will be making my slides available online. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. So feel free to get in touch with me. My email address is there at the top. I'm also on Twitter and Mastodon, and I have my own website. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you.